Welcome to the Queen of Awakening podcast, where you can learn how to leverage your energy for thriving relationships, better vitality, and more prosperity. Hosted by Jessie Cole. Welcome to episode 7 of the Queen of Awakening. I am Jessie Cole, and I have with me here Sophia Benedict. She is a dear friend. She's also a certified human design coach, NLP practitioner, hypnotherapist, and a breathwork facilitator. She is a woman of many, many hats.
That I am. Thank you so much for having me on the show today, Jessie.
I'm so glad that you were able to make it. Third tries the charm, right?
Yes.
So she has worked with me a lot. We have gone over my human design. I've done several breathwork sessions with her, which are very powerful and healing, I must admit. So what got you into this line of work?
That's a good question. So initially, I think my journey started many, many years ago, probably around 2015 or so. I was introduced to the digital space and, saw the potential of, wealth and freedom that was available to those who started an online business. And that kind of started like this whole entire journey, like the awakenings and, the spiritual development, personal development. But I didn't actually I went through many different forms of quote unquote businesses before it eventually landed here. But originally, again, it was just to have that freedom, the financial freedom, the time freedom to be able to be home with my family and homeschool my kids. And as I went deeper and down the rabbit hole in the personal development world, which eventually kind of like switched gears to the spiritual development world. I started picking up tools along the way, different modalities like NLP and breathwork and human design, and it brought me here to this day where I just absolutely love coaching people and helping people transform their lives so they can live just a better life with more joy, peace, happiness, whatever it is for them.
I love that. Which one's your favorite modality so far?
That's a tough question. I don't think I have a favorite. I really like to meet people where they are for starters. I would
That's
say
important.
Yeah, for sure. Breathwork it's really magical. I don't really know how else to put it other than there's so much magic that can happen from a single breathwork session. And that's why I offer those classes for free virtually, at least at this time and age, at the time of this recording, because I want to just reach as many people as possible to help them heal themselves and to find more love and compassion and empathy within themselves.
So tell me more. How does a breathwork session usually happen for people that haven't experienced it?
So breathwork the session is about 45 minutes, and the first 30 minutes is where we do the active breath, like the actual work in the breathwork. It all is done with music, upbeat, fun music that most people are pretty familiar with. And so it's a 2-step breath in and out through the mouth. It's a belly, chest, exhale. And we do that for about 30 minutes. And I just guide, everyone throughout the process, reminding them, that it's a belly, chest, exhale, reminding them that they've got this, that they're supported, that they are loved as they go through this. Really, there's no human descriptors for the experience that really happens because it's so different for every person. And then after that 30 minutes or so of breathing, we move into just a rest breath, just in and out through the nose, so they can kind of integrate the healings or whatever happened during that session.
What are some crazy things that can happen during the breathwork classes?
I wouldn't necessarily say crazy, but everyone has their own unique experience, and there are some common sensations, such as like tingling in the body, feeling hot or cold, getting clenched up, like the lobster claws, like Jessie gets.
That happened to me.
Yeah, it's
You can actually shake out your hands to help release the energy. It's just energy moving, right?
Yep, it's just energy moving through your body. It tends to be the places where there's more like stuck emotions inside. Maybe there you feel that in different places in your body. So it's just a really interesting, unique experience, and it's different for everyone.
Sure. How many how many different ways have you facilitated this? I mean, can you do in person? Can you do internet
Mhm. So
groups?
yep, I really love group sessions, because I feel like there's just so much power in coming together to do this type of work. But it's also really beneficial in a one-on-one setting. It can be more personalized for that person. And I've done one-on-one sessions with you, so you know what that's like. But I teach locally about every other month or so at our local yoga studio, just because again it's something that I wish I want to bring to the whole world. So it's in my local community and then virtually opened up to the whole world. And I have had people from all over, Ireland,
Really?
Australia. Yeah, it's just really fun to bring everyone together.
Wow. How do you feel it helps them transform? How does it help them release the emotions? Because I feel personally like I have a lot of trapped emotions that I'm slowly but surely shedding like an onion, but it's so deep, there can be such serious deep wounds that you have. So how does it help facilitate healing?
Well, again, it's a different experience for everyone. I just had a class last night locally where I had one person tell me that it was like 10 years of therapy in one session. And then I had another person tell me that she didn't really experience any intense emotions,
Oh
that she
my.
felt really grounded, and like it helped her just ground into the present moment. So, how they walk away and integrate what happened in that session is really going to be dependent on the individual. So I think that a lot of it is about really bringing what's subconscious to the conscious.
I love
So
that.
yeah, so the whole process is kind of um, it's a surrender to the experience for one, so we don't really consciously know what's happening. And in the beginning you can be in your head a lot, which I also guide people out of. But once you surrender to the experience and you just allow whatever's supposed to happen, and of course you've set your intention beforehand, that helps. But yeah, I think a lot of it is about just bringing subconscious aspects of ourselves conscious, like back to the conscious. Another just quick story from last night. One of the ladies said she had no idea that this is what was going to come from this experience, because you don't going into it. But she shared how when at the end I do different types of like guided meditations, and this one was like an inner child healing.
I love those.
Yeah. And so I took everyone back to, the time that they were 3 years old, and had them, look at themselves and hug themselves. And she said that she just remembered her, at 3 years old, her brother had passed away.
Oh,
And she wasn't affected by his death because she was just so young and didn't really,
sure.
know him. But what she realized was like that changed the whole family dynamics.
Absolutely. How could it not?
So as a 3-year old, she lost like that joy of childhood. And so like her purpose,
Oh,
what she shared was that like her word is joy. Like she just tries to live the most joyous life. And she's substantially older, probably, not substantially older, but she's probably in her 50s. So she's lived a long life. And that joy piece is so important for her. And she kind of like put all the pieces together last night from that session as to
That's
why that.
powerful. What have some of your sessions been like?
My personal sessions.
If you don't mind sharing.
Yeah, sure. So I always remember the first time and that I did this, and I just thought that it was so magical, so powerful. Um, I I cried. Actually, I'm sorry. The first time I didn't cry. The first time it was just such a, there's no words to put on it. I just remember feeling so rejuvenated, so full of vitality after, so full of energy. Like it brought me back to myself, brought me back home to who I am. And sessions afterwards, and I always tell people too, like when you come into a session, whether you've, had one facilitated by me or by somebody else, not to put any judgment as to what the experience is, because it's so freaking different every time. I have had sessions where I've cried. I've had sessions where I've, just felt this overwhelming sense of joy and happiness. I have had sessions where I've intentionally gone in trying to clear my throat chakra, and have been able to do that to where I could show up and, speak on video with more confidence and more clarity. So I'd say those are the best ways it's helped me.
That's powerful. I feel like it helped me clear out a lot of stuff that I was carrying with me from years and years and years ago.
Yeah. Emotions, as you're aware, get stuck in our body. We hold them in when we don't process them. And, they tend to be the reasons that disease happens. That's a topic for another day.
It is.
However, it releases all that shit that you've been holding on to for, probably since before birth, some of it. And it just allows you to open yourself up and bring awareness to those aspects that need to be dove into further, because maybe something will come up for you that you didn't even know was an issue, but now you have awareness to that and you're able to, work on that in different ways.
That's awesome. So, how would you be willing to share what helped you with your awakening journey? Like, do you remember what the key factor was that kind of kicked it off? What made you realize that you're an immortal spiritual being living in this temporary human experience?
Yeah, it's so hard to like pinpoint one particular instance, but the first one that always comes to mind is when it was actually a podcast episode, on the Mind Your Business podcast with James Wedmore and Jim Fortin. I believe it's episode 114, if I remember correctly. And in that episode, Jim, this is the first time I was introduced to Jim Fortin. And he is also, a master NLP practitioner and, coach. And he's been doing it for many, many, many years, many decades off, out of the digital space, working with, high performers. And one of the things that he talked about, or the main thing that he talked about on that podcast, was that you are a thinker of your thoughts. And that sentence, like something within that, like changed something within me. And it's like I had always known that, like I've always been aware that I'm the one thinking my thoughts, but I never really realized until that point that as the thinker of my thoughts, I have the ability to change my thoughts and change what I'm thinking. And so that really took me out of this state of, I used to be a perpetual overthinker, somebody who would lay down at the end of the day and, my head would hit the pillow and, a million things would race through my mind about the day, what I could do differently. what I could do better. I wish, the dreams, the aspirations, all of it. And it would keep me awake at night. And I struggled with insomnia because of this for most of my life. And then once I was able to really like pull myself out of that and just become the observer of my thoughts, I realized how much more, one, how much more power we have as individuals over ourselves, and realize that that alone allows us to create our own reality. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I think that's like the big one. As I think that answered your question. I hope it did.
Is that what got you into NLP?
Yes, very much so. So actually, a couple months, maybe a month or so later, 2 months later, I was I had planned to go to a business event, James Wedmore's Business by Design Live in California. And he had planned a special guest speaker, and it was a surprise. And he wouldn't tell anybody what it was. There were a million guesses. And it turns out the surprise guest speaker was Jim Thornton. And I was just like floored, like over the moon excited, probably more excited than anyone else in that room, because that single episode so much to like flip my life around. And so I got to hear him speak, and it was the first, I think it was the first Business by Design event. And so there weren't very many people there. I think now the event's up to hundreds of people. I think then it was like 50 or
Oh,
70.
wow.
It was just such a, I mean, I remember then it felt huge, but I went to one afterwards that was way bigger. And anyway, I was able to speak with Jim, you know, one-on-one during lunch. I skipped lunch break to, just talk to him, and I guess, if you will, pick his brain, because I was just obsessed, for lack of better words, with everything that he had to share. And I met a friend or somebody there who I later became friends with, and she was also an NLP practitioner and had shared with me, a school that she had went to that, wasn't that great, and kind of geared me in the right direction of a school where, I could learn this and become certified and, go from there.
What a great opportunity.
Yeah.
That's very cool. So, oh goodness. I kind of want to backtrack. You said that everybody's knows that they are the thinker of their thoughts, but I don't feel like everybody does know that. I feel like a lot of people are run by their thoughts.
Absolutely. What I was saying is that I knew.
Oh,
I
you knew.
I
That's
recognized
powerful.
that from like a little age. Well, it wasn't so powerful because I didn't know how to control it, even though I had that thought before, like, okay, because it's the voice in your head that's your own. Those are the thoughts, right? And it's like,
Correct.
okay, well, that's my voice. But I never like put two and two together that, like, if I'm the thinker of my thoughts, then I also have the ability to change my thoughts and to control them. And
Sure.
that was kind of like the big switch. It just really like hit home. I felt it like at a cellular level, that whole episode. It was just so incredibly life changing.
I found it to be really powerful to learn that myself because I've always believed in God. I've been an avid reader my whole life. And I remember even as a child, I picked out a book called Sisters long ago. And I read that book. It was in the kids section, but it was about a girl that had a sister back in the Egyptian period because I wanted a sister so bad. And that was when I started believing in past lives, which didn't really mesh with the whole Christianity concept here in the United States. So that's
Especially
neither
the
here
men
nor there. But I struggled with depression and anxiety. And I read a book about thought forms probably 14, 15 years ago. And that was where things started to come together. I was like, wow, this is powerful. Why aren't we taught this in school?
Yeah, no kidding. I also struggled with depression, like severe depression as a teenager, a young teenager, like probably starting at 12, maybe even 11, and on, well into my 20s. And, all the books that I've read that I started off reading in the personal development world, not so much spiritual development, but just personal development, mindset shifts, etc. We're not taught that in school.
No.
And I homeschool, my kids, and that's the stuff that I want to be teaching them, because
Yeah.
the rest of it really doesn't matter. Everything else can be learned. This is the stuff that we shouldn't be waiting until we're in our 20s, late 20s, 30s to
If you
start.
ever come across it. I mean, some people don't ever find it.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, I gotta say, as a mom, I feel like my number one service for my kids is teaching them emotional intelligence and teaching them that they are in charge of their lives. And I get a lot more resistance from my stepson than I do my bio son. And as you know, we're pretty different, but I just keep pushing it. I keep letting him know, because his mom is, she's a calamity. And, she makes mountains out of molehills. And my husband and I both tell him, things aren't this bad. They don't need to be so complex. They don't need to be so complicated. And so it's nice to see him shifting his perspective a little bit. So
It's beautiful.
yeah. What are you reading right now?
Oh
Do
my
you have any
gosh.
book recommendations?
Well, I'm not going to show it. It's just
Did you have to, was that what you were moving at the beginning?
No, I was moving another book that was an astrology book, my astrology Bible. Um, let's see. So just about every day I read something. I just open up my human design book and pick a random page and just read it. I read from the I Ching almost every day. That's where in human design, the gates come from the hexagrams within the I Ching, which is an ancient Chinese divination tool. Highly recommend it. It's a beautiful, beautiful read. And then I'm also finishing up Women Who Run with Wolves, which I also highly recommend to all the women out there, no matter what stage of life you are in, because that's also a really beautiful book. And I've also been tuning back into, this is a book that I read, I don't even know how many times I've read it, but The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle is
Oh, yes.
another one that I just think that every single human should read over and over and over and over
I
and over
agree.
and over again, because unless you're like a shaman and you've reached like that ultimate stage of enlightenment,
Right.
um we don't have a grasp on living in the now. And
Sure.
you know I,
Until you have no commentary going on in your head, you have
yeah.
to be continuously reminded.
Yep.
Because I don't know about you, but I've had awakening experiences, but I'm not enlightened. I mean, I still have that mental chatter going on. So, all that stuff skews your perception.
It does. And I think that, for me, I'm at this stage where I have been able to, just because I've practiced it for so long, and it's been this constant, it's in the beginning, it's this moment to moment to moment to moment reminder to bring yourself back into the present moment, because in the present moment, there are no fears, there are no worries, unless you're, faced with maybe a gun in your face. Like there might be some fear there, but that's usually not the case for most people. It's, we create these emotions, the sense of fear, the sense of shame and guilt and worry. We create that. And if you pull yourself to the present moment, that doesn't exist. You
Sure.
worry in the present moment about not paying your bills at the end of the month, and that's usually the devil's advocate. In my industry with coaching, it's like, well, how can you tell me this, because I have bills to pay, and how am I going to pay my bills if I'm not making any money? And my response to that is, well, are your bills due right now? And the answer is no. It's always no. They're not due right now at this very moment. So, okay, what can you do right now to move yourself forward? And that's a question that you constantly have to ask yourself. What can I do right now to lead myself to where I want to be?
I love that. That's very powerful.
Yeah. And the reason I read The Power of Now over and over again, and a lot of my, I would say, top 10 books or so, is because, as I expand and evolve, I take in the information differently. I read that book. It's actually one of the few that I listen to because I just love his voice on Audible. It's
Oh,
so soothing, and I tend to just like pop it in before bed. Um, but I am always hearing something that I hadn't heard before. And so that's why I continue to read it over and over and over.
that's powerful. I love it. How do you balance your coaching business with your family?
Mm, great question. For one, I'm not really sure what balance is because, you know, the definition of balance isn't something that I feel like we can put into our life, but rather I look at all different aspects of my life. So motherhood, wifehood, um, friendship, career, personal health. And I kind of look at all those different relationships and all those different places. And I just, I make sure that they're all thriving and that there's peace within all of them for me or and joy. And so I do that by one, I take a lot of breaks. And I am somebody who does work from home. So I do have that advantage. But I do also feel like people that are in the workforce, working Monday through Friday, a typical 40-hour a week job, also can make the space throughout their days to take more time for themselves to recharge and replenish. And in doing that, that's allowed me to, number one, get more work done. Taking multiple breaks throughout the day, like literally after everything I do, I break. Like after this podcast episode, I'm going to go plop on my bed for a few minutes and just sit there before I put my clothes on and head to the gym. It's just a way for me to, like, I guess, fill the battery back up. Um, and so, and just the other thing is following my energy too. I don't feel like I'm a great friend or mom or wife or coach if my energy is drained. And so if I have a friend, for example, ask if I want to go to lunch and I'm like, well, first of all, I never not want to go to lunch or really ever want to not hang with my friends. So that's probably a really bad example. But maybe, I'm asked to do a favor. That's a common one, like asked to do a favor for somebody. And if I really don't want to do it, if my energy says no, then it's a no. And it's a polite no, or maybe it's later. Maybe, it's not right now, but I can help you later, sort of thing. And that just keeps everything, I think, if you would call it, balanced.
It sounds like you have a pretty good grasp on your energy.
I do. I feel like everyone should, and they should guard their energy with like their life because that's all we have at the end of the day is, we have total control of our energy and it allows us to live, when we have that vitality, that's what allows us to live a more joyous, peaceful, loving life.
How did you learn about your energy? Was this something that you knew innately as well?
It is, yeah. And I haven't always honored it, but I have always innately knew that I only have so much to go around. And I've always protected my energy too, because I don't like to be in shitty situations. I don't like to feel uncomfortable. I don't like small talk. I don't like,
Small talk's the worst.
it is. And I be around people that just make me feel or that I get bad vibes from. So I just choose, I feel like they're like energy vampires, if you will, when I'm around somebody who doesn't vibe well with me. And so, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, well, how do I do that when it's my sister or it's my mother or my mother-in-law? And
Boundaries.
there is boundaries. Yes, it's your choice at the end of the day. Can we still be polite and show up? Yes, but there have been people in my life, um, you know, relatives, if you will, that I choose to distance myself from. And I invite them to, family gatherings, of course, birthdays and holidays. But I don't willingly spend time with them otherwise. And,
Sure.
some people might think that's shitty, but um,
It's about protecting your energy though, at the end of the day.
yeah.
And I got to tell you, I really, really, I'm, I mean, jealousy is not really the word, but I wish I would have learned this a long time ago because I'm 41 now and it took me this long to just say no, to stop feeling guilty about not seeing those people that are negative, to embrace my power and embrace my solitude. Because I used to go, 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 and, say yes all the time and show up for everybody. And it's not even ideal for me. Like I've learned with COVID shutdown actually that it's okay to be by myself and to take time for myself. And I feel like that's where astrology and human design is really good because it helps you learn more about yourself and what works best for you.
Absolutely. And I'll touch on that in just a moment, but also just a little reframe for you. Like, how beautiful is it that you're 41 and you have discovered it? Because now you get to use that for the rest of your life. You
That's
know,
true. It just seemed like a lot of time that I had pain and suffering and that I could have just avoided it by saying, no, I don't want to come over. But instead I'm like, oh, it's my family. I've got to go. But yeah, that's a great reframe. Thank you for that.
yeah. We're all at different stages in our life. And I don't ever want somebody to think it's too late for them to change the way that they show up in this world and the choices that they have, because it's never too late for anything. I mean, you and I think both met this same person through a local group that we were in. I don't know how old he is, but if I were to guess, he would probably be in his 70s, and he was going back to school at that age to get his doctorate in metaphysical something or
Yeah.
other. And I'm like, how cool is that? Like, this guy could, I mean, looking at statistics, could fall over and just like kick it at any moment, just due to old age. But he is like still living as if, he has the rest of his life, so many more years to live and do that. So that's really cool.
That's true. Yeah, age is just a number. And it's also really important to remember that we all have our own lessons, we all have our own soul contracts, and we're all on different spots on our spiritual path.
Absolutely. And I just had to tell myself that recently, when as my son moves out and goes into the real world, I was just thinking back on all of our time together and, kind of a little bit down on myself for a moment about, wishing that I could have started with him like where I am now. Like I wish that I could be a mother to my kids, like starting now with what I know, because man, would it be so much different and better. However, I'm grateful for all of the previous times because all of that is what led me here. There's no
Sure.
saying that if I started now, that I might have not had the knowledge and the wisdom that I have now. Um, without those experiences.
We,
So
we grew up together with our kids, don't we?
sure do.
Ideally.
Yeah.
All right. I was wondering if you would be willing to share a dark night of the soul experience that you went through. I feel like that's a really powerful transformational thing. I feel like in this earth realm, suffering is what kicks it off.
Yeah, no kidding. It's a hard pill to swallow sometimes, especially as a mother, because we don't want our kids to have those deep sufferings, but it's an inevitable. I don't think it's necessary, but it seems to be an inevitable part of the human experience. And so for me, I think dark night of the soul would be when we were traveling in an RV. So we decided to, get rid of our house and our belongings and pack up what we could in a 40-foot fifth wheel and travel the country. And it was really great for a while until it wasn't. And we were in this position where we were basically homeless because, you know, I don't feel like I need to get into the details there, but we didn't have our house to go back to, and we didn't have anywhere to go back to. We just had an RV, and we were running out of money, running out of our savings, and we had gone down to Florida. That's where my husband and I are originally from, and we stayed at my mother-in-law's house. We parked in her driveway, and I love my mother-in-law to pieces. However, the man that she was married to wasn't the nicest, and so that brought about a lot of challenges staying there. I am very grateful for them, though. They did, give us work. I helped my mother-in-law at her flower shop, and my husband, did some projects around the house for them. And so we were able to make some money and, of course, live there, without having to pay any bills while we figured out what that next step was. And I, you know, and again, this is probably a good reason to not set expectations, but I had set this expectation that we would go there and we would work for about a month. And in that month, we would, make money, save money and find a job and find somewhere to land. But that wasn't the case because once we got there and started looking for jobs and where we wanted to live, it was like the hardest thing in the world to, people think that they're like trapped where they are and they want to move somewhere else. And they say, oh, I'd rather be anywhere but here. But when you actually have that option to be anywhere, like if you have a map of the world or just the United States in our instance, like you could go anywhere. Where do you choose?
Right.
And we knew what we were looking for in a place and we knew what we didn't want in a place. And it just didn't seem, it's basically fucking paradise. And I don't know where that is. So I really think that I found it here in Angola. And so I really went through this dark night of the soul there when, when I felt homeless. I felt like it was all my fault. I really pushed my husband to make that decision, and he was a little bit weary of it because he didn't want to leave the stability, and so we were in this position with no money, no house, having nowhere to go. We started applying for jobs, both of us. Neither one of us could get anything. Like we must have put in hundreds of applications, hundreds,
Wow.
and just nothing was biting back. And looking back, I think I realized that a big part of that was I think companies nowadays have like a filter almost on their application process because they get so many. And so I feel like if it's not within like a certain zip code, maybe they're just like trashing them, because as soon as we changed our address and like zip code to match where we were applying, we started getting interviews.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah, but we didn't know that. And so I was just, I don't know how else to describe it. I mean, saying this out loud doesn't really seem like a big deal, but what I was feeling inside was a huge deal. And I just wanted a safe place for my family and I to be at and to start, building some more stability and structure, and the kids to make friends again and us to make friends again. And I just felt so lonely. I mean, my husband and I, we talked about divorce at that point in time, not because we didn't love each other or because we didn't want to be with each other, but just because like we were both in this position to where we felt so individually alone, individually, like we hated ourselves. And
Oh,
so we had even like talked about like the logical reasons and how we would, like we had it all set up, like this is what you would get, this is what I would get, like this is what, like who would take the dogs, like how would the kids be split up, like we had it all figured out. And
wow.
at the end of the day though, we both realized that no matter what. Like, we would rather be with each other than live, or rather be with each other and live out of a cardboard box, you know what I mean, with absolutely nothing, than to split up and just do it on our own. It was just a silly, but like, just to, that goes to show like just how low of a state we were in, that we were considering literally every single possibility that was out there. You know, because if we got divorced, he could go stay with his mom and, you know, figure things out. I could go probably stay with my mom and, you know, get myself back on my feet. But like, to do it together, you know, as a family, staying at his parents' house, you know, at his stepdad and mom's house, it was too much. And um, anyway, so how did I pull out of that?
Yes.
So I made a decision. So we finally, my husband finally landed a job. Or no, sorry, he did not land a job. Did not. Sorry.
Just
He
kidding.
did. Well, actually, he did. I guess that's where I was going with that. He did, but we didn't want to be. It was in Indiana, back in Indiana, and we didn't want to be surrounded by cornfields again. Like, we didn't want to go back to that.
I don't
And
blame you. Cornfields suck.
yeah. And so we had saved up some money, you know, because we were working, and we finally made a decision like, we have to get out of here. So we're going to we chose Bloomington, Indiana, because we said, well, we lived in Indiana before. We know that there are jobs there. We know that there is affordable housing. And Bloomington wasn't surrounded by cornfields. It was very geographically beautiful. It's a college town, so there's a lot of diversity. You know, it had all of that we wanted, for the most part. So that was our little tack on the map, that we're like, okay, we're going to go there. And we made that decision, and we were like getting ready to pack up and leave, and our transmission went out on the truck. Yeah. And so, it was under warranty, and the warranty company ended up, they wouldn't pay it. They like basically ghosted us. It was a terrible situation. And so that like held us back for another 10 days or so while we got the transmission fixed. But anyway, so we set out and to Bloomington, and I made a decision that day that we left, that I was going to apply all of the principles that I had ever learned about law of attraction and manifestation. And I was actually going to put those to use. I was going to embody them and see what happens. And it was just an experiment. I was like, I'm just going to do this for the next year. And
what else could go wrong, right?
yeah, what else could go wrong? I'm going to apply this. And if in a year I'm still where I'm at and I haven't grown, I haven't made any progress, then I don't even know what I said I would do, but then I would basically just give up on life. And so I had all these different principles of law of attraction to my life. And and just following my intuition too, just following, you know, just trusting that everything was working out for us. And so we ended up in Bloomington for about 6 weeks, could not find a job, like could not land a job. We had interviews, we put an application, or not interviews, sorry, we put in applications and couldn't get interviews. That was the big problem, is like nobody would get us in the door. And so here we are in Bloomington, getting ready to run out of money again. And I told my husband, I said, you've got to call back that job that was going to hire you and just let them know that, you know, you're in Bloomington now, you know, you're just a couple hours away, and see if they still have a spot. So he did. And this time they wanted him to come in for an in-person interview, because they're like, you know, we did the video interview before, you turned us down. So, you know, we need some skin in the game, you know, come here. So he did. He left us in the trailer, took the truck, drove, you know, the 3.5 hours to, you know, Kendallville, and got the job. And so we said, screw it, we're going to head north. And that's how we ended up here in Angola. And just within, I don't know, a week of being here, well, I was able to get a job as well as a barista. And within just a week or two of us being here, just from a post that I made in a Facebook group, a local homeschool group, one of the ladies in there stalked me on Facebook and saw
I remember that.
similar interests, and she ended up reaching out. and asking, if I would like to come to her house and have, meet her family. And I was like, well, this is freaking weird, but you know what? I said I was willing to trust the process. So I had to like shut my ego mind away and just trust and follow, the breadcrumbs. And I'm so glad that I did, because that turned out to be one of my best friends now, which also led me to you, because she was like, oh, my friend Jessie, I think you would really like her too. And she's having this, camp out at our house next weekend. I'm sure she won't mind if you come, but I'll ask her just to be sure. And it's funny because I ended up leaving her house that day and thinking like, oh my God, like, what if I messed up? Like, what if I just made a terrible impression because I had said something, that was just in regards to her husband made a comment, or she made a comment that her husband was gluten free, or no, she asked me how I kind of ate. And I was like, well, I try to be like gluten free most of the time, but I'm not like one of those gluten free people. And she's like, oh, well, my husband is. And I just thought like that ruined everything, because he never got back to me on going to your house for camping. It had been like days. And I'm like, and of course, knowing her now, it's just like, well, she just takes long to do things. But I was like, oh, I ruined it. Like, it's not going to happen. But then she finally messaged me and she's like, oh, by the way, I asked Jessie and she said yes. And here we are.
Well, and a funny story about that. I live in the same town that I grew up in, and I had moved away for a big part of my awakening, but I came back and all my friends moved, or I outgrew them. And so I felt really lonely. And I was working in a church cleaning, listening to a guy that he made a training episode, or like a video training course that had to do with the law of one. I found out later on. And I was praying for a couple of years for God to send me friends. And I'm like, I'm so lonely. Just please send me friends. And, I've got a really wonderful husband, but he doesn't get me. He's very materialistic and, earth oriented, which is fine. It balances me. But then I met Jessica, and then she brought Sophia here. And then slowly but surely, we started gathering more and more people to our little weird side of the territory, and it's just been lovely. It's really nice to have a group of friends that's open-minded, and sometimes we don't see each other for a while, and that's fine. We're busy with our kids and stuff, but it's good to have that support system.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's everything that I set out to quote unquote manifest, everything that I wanted to bring into my life. I actually have a journal entry somewhere from that time that I was in Bloomington, or maybe, yeah, when I was in Bloomington, where I actually like wrote everything out. I think it was on our drive there when I made that decision, and I wrote out all the things that I wanted. And one of those things was, a group of friends, where it's a group. It's not just one. I've my whole life I've always had like one, a few different best friends, but never as a group. They've always been like
Yeah,
different from each other. And so I wanted a group of friends where our kids were this like similar ages and they could be friends.
it's
And
like we were made for each other.
it really is. I mean, and we all had these same um desires for friendship.
Yeah, it's true.
And here we are. So yeah, it's really beautiful. And when you trust yourself and trust the process, and that everything will work out.
And funny story, right after she moved here and I met her, my spirit guides, I've noticed that synchronicities are a big part of my spirit guides, letting me know what's going on. I ran into her everywhere for a month. Every time that I left the house, I would run into her. It was really bizarre.
I remember that.
Yeah,
But
it
yeah,
was a fun time. All right. So we should probably be wrapping things up here. Do you have any words of wisdom or ideas that you want to share with anybody?
um well, I guess on, the note that we just left on, trust the process, and, kind of, and just to add to that too, for anyone that's thinking that maybe heard that story and they're like, oh, well, easy for you to say because you know, you just moved to a new area. So you were presented with a new group of people and opportunities to make friends, because I hear that a lot. But the reality of it is you, Jessie, already lived here your whole life. You were born and raised here.
It
it was
wasn't
so
easy.
possible for you, right? It wasn't easy, but like you still had that opportunity to, make friends by trusting the
Sure.
process. So yeah, trust the process and, become an observer of your life. I think that's like the biggest thing, is just to observe everything. And, when things happen in my life now, I just kind of look at it from like almost like this camera that's like up here and looking down, and like I say that's interesting because I don't, things only have the meaning that we put behind them. And for so long I lived in like a this or that world, like it's either good or it's bad, and that's not the case. Like we just need to observe more and ask ourselves better questions. Like ask yourselves better questions, dig deeper to get to the bottom of what's really, really going on.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
I think it's also powerful to know that life isn't trying to thwart you and that it's not supposed to be easy.
Right.
Because once things start getting easy, then you get complacent and you're not growing, and something will happen because we come here to earth to grow and to change, and there's lessons that have to be learned. And I hear from my husband often, he's like, oh, these things always happen. And he doesn't believe in the law of attraction. And pity for him, because he's like, oh, it's easy for this guy at work, but it always happens for him, but it never happens for me. And I just smile and I say, yeah, I bet, because he doesn't believe in this spiritual mumbo jumbo. So he gives me a really good bouncing off place to observe and try and insert here and there.
Yeah. Beautiful. So I had something to say on that, but I lost it. So anyway, go ahead.
I can't think of anything else. Gesundheit.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being a guest. And I think we're going to have to do more of these because we didn't even delve into human design or anything like that. So more
I'd
podcasts.
love to geek out on some human design and, astrology stuff again, on another episode, because that's like a whole, I mean, I could have a whole podcast, and there are people that do just on human design alone. So
I'm sure. Yeah, we can do different ones. We'll cover manifestors first and then generators and
yeah,
so
sounds
on
good.
and so forth. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I will link up all of your information and I will be seeing you again.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.